Today's episode of Outreach Asia is brought to you by Spaces. Spaces offers creative working environments with a unique entrepreneurial spirit. Visit spacesworks.com. And London Institute of Business and Technology. LIBT makes executive education accessible and affordable to everyone. Visit libt.co.uk.
We have an amazing episode for you today on Outreach. Stay tuned. Welcome to the program, everybody. I'm your host, Sesiri. Welcome to Outreach. As you can see, the setup we have here today is slightly different. Usually we have the screen in the back. Because you know why? Spaces Prakano is having the grand opening today. And we have a couple of goodies for you as well. And if you put a like to us on any of these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, wherever it may be, and email us a copy, and we'll mail you this bag. We'll mail you the Spaces bag, and also we have these one-day free passes, all access free passes to Spaces here at Prakano, or any of the branches here in Thailand actually. As you know, this is a program where we talk about startups. I usually try to get founders, CEOs, CTOs, anybody who's working on solving a problem. Today, here on the program, I have a very special guest. As you know, companies, when founders, try to build products together, some of the things, especially if you're a new company, if you're a new entrepreneur that is putting a product or a service together, they need a lot of mentorship. They need financing. They need the banks, the academia, and the whole nine yards to work with them. To help these entrepreneurs, there's incubators. We know Y Combinator, which is one of the biggest incubators in the States. Here in Thailand, we have several incubators. TechGrind is one of the prominent ones. Today on the program, I have here Tony Abrahamsson. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right.
It's good enough.
He's a venture partner here at TechGrind. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about TechGrind. I mean, I met you briefly a few weeks back, and I kind of know what you guys do.
Yeah.
I've checked out the site. Tell us a little bit about TechGrind.
Absolutely. So TechGrind is a private business incubator, which means that we are funded by private individual money. We're not owned by any large corporate, which is the case with many other incubators here in Bangkok and in Thailand. And TechGrind has been around in Bangkok actively incubating companies since 2015. So 3.5 years approximately right now. And basically we consist of an international team of partners. We have people, myself from Sweden, we have Americans, Russians, and so forth, also part of our team. So we try to bring in our international experiences from different types of entrepreneurial ecosystems, whether it's in Silicon Valley or in Sweden, and bring that knowledge and experience to this region.
how's TechGrind different from all the other incubators out here?
That's pretty much goes back a little bit to my last answer actually, that we have this international experience, this international mindset, and that's kind of set us apart to a large extent from, well, if you want to call them competitors, if you will, but a lot of the other incubators here in Thailand also. So that's why we are a very attractive option, because we know what works in other regions, in other successful startup hotbeds around the world, and we want to make sure that this region gets the same type of best practices implemented.
Okay. Most of these incubators we've come across, they usually have batches, and I was told that you don't have batches. What is the application process like?
This is something that has changed a little bit going into 2018, because now what we're doing now, we have an acceleration program where we actually do have batches, and we just finished last month the first batch of that acceleration program. So when it comes to acceleration, we do have batches, but not for incubation. And now also the reason that we wanted to start with acceleration as well is that we kind of wanted to pre-test the startups that we're going to potentially work for incubation. And then basically you have acceleration, which is a very intense 8-week program. And then if you pass the milestones and what we want to achieve and what we want to see from them, then we basically allow them or give them a green light for incubation based on that. So that is sort of like an additional approach to it, and the other approach to it is basically working as we have been working before. It's sort of like we very sort of selective and make individual sort of selections rather than select batches consisting of 5 to 8 companies or whatever it might be.
For somebody who doesn't know much about incubators, what would be the difference? How would you differentiate what is acceleration and what is an incubator?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because that's one of those terms that sort of get confused easily.
Yeah.
And there's many sort of meanings and definitions of that thrown around. And also, what we see is that acceleration is something that happens at the very early stage. This is how you sort of get going. This is how you sort of learn how to do things, how give you sort of the toolbox to be able to grow further. So we see acceleration as something that happens pre-incubation. And then incubation is that, okay, so then you have a little bit of an idea of what you're doing. You have sort of like gotten off the ground a little bit, and then you're incubated, and then you're sort of taking the next step. And for basically in our setup, it's like an 18-month process. And whereas at the end of that 18 months, 18 months, yes. Yeah, a year and a half. And then at the end of that year and a half, at the tail end there, they should be ready to have a proper Series A funding round.
And so there are so many conversations about this topic. The question that I'm going to ask you, is there such a thing called a perfect founding team? I mean, sometimes you hear things like, oh, you need to have a developer and a designer and a business guy. Is there such a thing called a perfect founding team?
Well, I mean, it's also one of those interesting things. I mean, I'm a huge fan of ice hockey. And usually ice hockey, you have forward lines consisting of 3 players. And then you kind of want to mix and match and make sure that these 3 players have different qualities, different set of skills, right? In order to, because you don't want 3 guys carrying the puck or three guys shooting. I would say it's pretty much the same as when you're starting a company, right? You don't want 3 or 4 guys doing the same thing, have the exact same skill set and that sort of thing, right? You want the skills to be complementary, and you want them to enhance each other, right?
Right.
I mean, you want sort of the sum to be greater than its parts.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on, sometimes you come across these couples, sometimes husband and wife who are founding partners. Mm-hmm. How do you see that? Do you think it's a good idea, if you're a couple, to be in the founding team?
For the startup or for the marriage? Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, it can be pros and cons to that. I mean, of course, I mean, the good thing is that they know each other and they're committed toward the same vision. So otherwise, I mean, there could be situations, for instance, with startup founders, I mean, they might have a spouse and they might have young children, and that sort of takes a toll on it. And it's I mean, if you don't have an understanding partner, if you don't have an understanding family, it can be very tricky.
Yeah.
So in that case, it can be a good thing, because then ideally, I mean, if you have a husband and wife team, at least they're aligned, they have the same vision, they want to do this, and they understand each other and can give each other proper support, ideally. So that could be good. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm a relationship counselor, but because I'm certainly not. But I guess that from a relationship point of view, it can also be a little bit difficult when you're working together and you're supposed to then also have a couple life together. So, so there's pros and cons. But then again, I mean, if they're both aware of what they're getting themselves into, it can be beneficial, actually. Although I haven't really, or we in TechGrind, we haven't really worked or incubated any of those yet, at least.
Okay. You are a huge fan of the lean startup concept.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you run the lean startup cycle here in Bangkok as well.
Yeah, right? Yeah, we have regular monthly lean startup events, yes.
I see. So around, this was when I was running the product company back in the day. One of the challenges I had was, I actually made a mistake at one point. I hired a CTO from a very corporate structure, and that did not work out at all.
Yeah,
because the processes that he was used to, I couldn't get the speed.
Yeah,
I couldn't get the speed, the rapid developments, and all of these things. And so it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And how do you see this? How do you would you see technical people that are in corporate environments getting into startup scene and building products?
I mean, obviously it happens a lot. I mean, both from the technical side and the business side, there are people with experience in working in large organizations, corporates, starting startups. I think it's a very common route, actually. However, I mean, talking for technical people in particular, well, more or less any type of people, I mean, usually, in my experience, there are a certain type of people who are attracted to work in a startup environment. And normally it's the type of people who get frustrated, who get demotivated by working inside a large corporation because they don't feel that they're getting recognized, they don't feel that that organization harnesses their creativity, their ideas, and so forth. So I guess that, but of course, I mean, you can always make mistakes when hiring, when recruiting. So I guess that my advice here is to really be careful when you have an interview process, when you talk to a person, why does he want to leave his corporate job? Why does he want to own a startup? And try to understand his personality a little bit. I mean, normally I'm not a huge fan of all this sort of recruitment personality tests, but in some cases they might also be useful if you're able to interpret and analyze them correctly, because then you can actually see a little bit what kind of personality that you're dealing with.
And a lot of the corporate settings I've come across, right? When they're used to these higher scale salaries and all of these benefits, it's a bit difficult to get used to the rough startup lifestyle, right? So I'm very careful. In terms of hiring technical people.
I mean, and also, I mean, you do need to be clear about, okay, so this is a situation, this is going to look like you're going to bootstrap, and that sort of thing. I mean, basically, you're going to be able to maybe live out your saving for 6 months or whatever it is, 9 months a year. So, I mean, this is something that you have to be ready for. And if you're not ready for that, well, maybe you're not suited for that role. But like I said, I mean, usually you can tell very early whether a person actually has what it takes or has the right sort of mindset for this. I mean, I can just give you an example also from Sweden. I mean, a good friend of mine, he was working for a large organization, actually in the government sector. And you can tell that just after like 2-3 months, I mean, he was sick of it. So he started that job there, and he was sick with the bureaucracy, how slow things moved, and the sort of the lack of innovation or an entrepreneurial mindset within that organization. So it took 6 months, and then he quit. But I mean, and then he started his own company. Actually, it's basically a tech service company. based on an algorithm for finding business opportunities in emerging markets. But you can definitely see that he's the type of guy who doesn't fit in those type of organizations. And this is something that you can easily, well, not easily, but you can see this rather early on when you start to have some sort of interview process or whatever it might be, where you just have a coffee with someone to begin with, and you sort of like, you probe a little bit with some questions, and then you get an idea for it.
So when I came across Lean Startup back in 2011, when Eric launched the book, I was like, oh my God, I mean, this is everything I wanted to do. This is everything, that I've been asking these, my technical guys to do. And he very nicely structured the whole thing and put it in a sort of in a theoretical way, if you think about it.
Yeah.
For somebody who are new to Lean Startup approaches, could you explain what that is?
Sure. Well, basically, what I really like about Lean Startup is that it actually brings in the scientific method into actually creating a startup and developing your startup. And it's basically about moving away from sort of the traditional idea of you have an entrepreneur, and this entrepreneur had this a really grand vision, and then you go all in on that grand vision, right? Whereas Lean Startup and the Lean Startup methodology is all about actually being open for the fact that you don't really know anything.
Right.
And you have maybe assumption about things, but in order to create in order to create knowledge out of these assumptions, what you need to do is actually get out of the building. You need to test things. You need to interact with customers, with partners, etc., etc. See, first of all, is this value proposition that we have relevant? And then in the second stage, can we actually build a business model around that value proposition? So for me, that's basically what Lean Startup is about. And what you do here is that you conduct various experiments, interviews, whatever you do. You get data from that, and then you analyze that data, and then you see, okay, what do we need to change? How do we need to pivot here? And so forth. What is our next step based on the information, the data that we have? And that's fundamentally the same thing as the scientific method. And obviously the scientific method has been working pretty well for the world for the past 300 years. Yeah. So based on that, there's no reason to believe that Lean Startup shouldn't be working either.
And I think we also have to credit Steve Blank.
Yeah.
He was one of the masterminds behind writing the book as well.
Yeah.
I think he helped Eric a lot.
We worked together very closely. I mean, both of them has contributed a lot to this. I mean, not just with books and articles, but with seminars and interviews and consulting and whatnot. So, I mean, they contributed tremendously.
So it is sort of like, Lean Startup has become sort of like the Bible to build companies now, if you think about it.
Yeah. But then again, I mean, it's not that surprising because, you use the scientific method to do science, and you can use Lean Startup to develop your startup.
So what Eric talks about, at least the interviews that I've seen, is mostly on software startups. Can Lean Startup methodologies be applied to hardware startups as well?
I definitely think so. I think that building a physical product in some cases might even be easier, because when you conduct your customer development, maybe you have some type of prototype, etc. You can display and show and see how users and customers might interact with that particular piece of hardware, and so forth. And I mean, the minimal viable product logic still holds, which means that you should not commit too many resources and all the bells and whistles into the product until you actually get it validated through your customer development process that it actually works, that this value proposition that you're having here with this product actually works. So I definitely think it works with hardware startups as well. And I mean, other ways of validating something in hardware is you can have like pre-sale sales, you can have pre-bookings online and so forth. I mean, I think that one hardware startup that did actually quite well with that is the Chinese phone company OnePlus. I don't know if you are, but then they just recently released a new phone. But when they were starting out, like 4 years ago, they were very lean actually, because I mean, they had this invite system for actually buying the phones, so they knew actually, okay, what is the number of phones that you need to produce, so we don't produce too many, so that we don't end up having huge capital expenditure for storage costs and that sort of thing. So I mean, they were very lean, and they were applying basically Lean Startup principles. And of course, I mean, now they don't have the invite system. Now you can order it without any problems and so forth. But that's how they start out, to actually test and validate that this is something that people want.
Yeah. Have you had any experience in the government sector in terms of lean approaches?
More in the sense that they're very far from it.
It is true.
Yeah.
It is true. But I do know that Eric has been at least in the U.S. government. Well, not this administration, the previous administration.
Yeah.
He was the CTO was very vocal in the Obama administration.
Yeah.
So I do know that they were working very closely on some of the initiatives they got. I'm not sure here though in Thailand.
No, I think that basically, if you're talking about sort of the startup ecosystem and the environment here in Thailand, I think that there are many sort of well-intended ideas being brought out here by the government and so forth, but obviously Thailand is, as an emerging economy, still have somewhere to go until.
How important is the initial founding team, the chemistry between the initial founding team, and also the hiring practices they have, at least within up until the first 10 employees, maybe in your point of view?
I think it's extremely important. It's crucial. Basically, from my personal point of view, I'm looking at it. Do they have a validated value proposition, validated business model, and then team is right on top there as well. So those are the top three things for me, because ultimately there are people who are going to do this, and if they're not a good match together, if they don't have complementary skills, and if they don't have chemistry also, on a personal level, you don't necessarily have to be best friends when you're founding a startup together, but you need to have some kind of chemistry, you need to have a lot of respect for each other, you need to have a functional working relationship. If you see that that's not really there, then it's a huge problem, and then it's probably, from an investor point of view or from an incubator point of view, that's a reason to pull out, actually.
If you really think about it, sometimes you might actually end up spending more time than the one you're married to, or the one you're going out to, right?
Exactly. And that's where you need to have, like I said, you need to have a lot of respect, you need to have complementary skills, and you really need to have a working relationship that is functioning.
So one of the challenges, not even here in Thailand, I think it's a challenge globally. One of the challenges startups come across is finding the right kind of talent.
Sure.
What is your take on that? How would you recommend startups here in Southeast Asia to find the right kind of talent?
That is something that I've seen here when I've been with TechGrind here for about a year, a little bit more than a year. Right. It's a huge challenge. It's really a huge challenge, and on the tech side especially. So finding software developers, software engineers, etc., it's a daunting task many times. Basically, my advice would probably be to try to interact when they are university students. Try to reach out to the universities and try to connect with the students that are there, and make them understand that, well, actually working in a startup, maybe being a technical co-founder, whatever it might be, it's a very viable career road. Because my impression here is that a lot of those students here in Southeast Asia, even though they might be in a software engineering program, they might envision a corporate career rather than a startup career. In Sweden and the US, then it's more or less the opposite these days.
Yeah. So India is close by.
Yeah.
I have come across startups, even here in Thailand, where the business front is basically here, the product development is happening in India.
Yeah.
How do you see this?
So as you said, it's happening in other countries as well, that you outsource production, and of course outsource the technical production of things, the coding, the development, and so forth. That happens in many places. There are Swedish entrepreneurs who do that, there's US entrepreneurs who do that, and the reason for that is, of course, that basically the cost structure is quite low in India. It's even lower than here in Thailand. Yeah. So, but however, our policy at TechGrind is that unless you have this type of thing in-house, then you're not going to be incubated by us. Yeah. Because we want a complete team. If you're a tech startup and you have no technical skills, then you don't have a complete team. Absolutely. And also, there's other potential problems with outsourcing these things. There's the whole legal side of things. Who owns what? Who owns the actual IP? Absolutely. Who owns the code? And it can also be done in a way that make it difficult to scale going forward and that sort of thing. So there's too many potential obstacles. So that's
I mean, even I've come across situations where like, oh, the startup says, oh, we own the IP for this, and then a totally different,
and then you may have to go to court for that, and then court in which jurisdiction, and so there's a quagmire of potential things that can go wrong there. So we definitely advise against it. And sometimes we had the case when we've been talking to startups that seems interesting. I mean, they might have good growth, they already have some revenue, and things seem to be going well. And then, okay, so, well, do you have a tech co-founder? How do you deal with the development? Oh, I'm outsourcing this to wherever it might be. Oh, there's a consultant, there's a freelancer, there's a blah, blah. And then we basically said that, well, that's great, but that's not really what we do. So come back to us when you're a technical co-founder.
Yeah. So a lot of these incubators that we come across try to tackle certain verticals.
Yeah.
Like some are in the health sector, some are only B2C, some are only B2B. What is TechGrind's policy? Do you look at certain verticals, or?
No. Basically, we don't actually. We're quite agnostic when it comes to verticals. So basically, we're open for anything as long as there's a strong software component into it. I mean, in the past and currently, I mean, we had ed tech, e-commerce, fintech, travel tech, etc., etc. So basically, we do the whole thing.
Okay. So at TechGrind, what is the offer like? What do you provide in return? How does that process work?
Aside from opportunities to sit down with me, then of course we provide. I mean, basically, what you would expect from an incubator in terms of course, business advice and also advice on the technical side, because we have in our team we have people with different skills. Me, I'm mostly more on the business side, and then we have people with strong tech skills, strong design skills, that sort of thing, that contribute with that. And of course, then we also have access to a partner network, which could be in terms of incorporation, it can be in terms of legal issues, and also various type of cloud credits, for instance, Amazon Web Services and that sort of thing.
Something like 100K.
Exactly. I mean, the exact amount. I mean, it can be several 100K depending on how much you use a particular service and so forth. So then the value of that service package can be quite substantial, actually.
That's actually a lot.
Yeah.
100K on AWS and like 125 on Google Cloud.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I mean, how much it ends up being depends on the startup's particular needs, right? Yeah. So that's two sides of it, and then of course they have the investment side. Yeah. So basically, when we incubate a company, we're able to offer pre-seed funding of $25,000, and then as the company hopefully successfully develops and moves on, then we also have access to a business angel syndicate that we push them for a seed round. Right. And then at the very, like I said before, at the very tail end of incubation, they should be ready for a Series A. And of course, we try to help out with that as well. And we're also in the process of funding our own venture capital fund, actually, to provide Series A type of funding. Okay. So that's basically how it looks like at the moment.
Okay. So some of the first-time entrepreneurs first-time startups that are watching this program, they might be confused. So what is a seed round? What is an angel round? What is Series A, B?
Yeah.
How do you
exactly. Basically, like I said, taking this from a TechGrind's point of view, so when you're incubated with us, you get a pre-seed round, $25,000, and we take 9% of equity in the startup. Okay. Which is, I would say, a fair amount of money at the fair valuation for the Southeast Asian market. And of course, I mean, as I said before, as your startup continues to grow and develop, then obviously you're going to need more investment. Yeah. And then basically how it looks like is that after pre-seed, you have seed, and that's usually done by angels. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that could be what we had in the past. I mean, that could be around the 100K range dollars. Right. And then hopefully then you move on to the proper Series A round. And Series A round is usually led by venture capital firms. So then it's more money and it's a different type of investor.
Yeah. Would you exit at that point, or would you be the?
I mean, usually, it depends a little bit, but usually we think that our goal is to take the companies through a Series A round, and then we think that our work is done, basically.
Okay.
That's how we see our role. We don't really want to keep ourselves in the business beyond that, because then we just restart the cycle with another startup product.
Yeah. Because of the blockchain and crypto revolution, now there's ICOs, initial coin offerings. I think some of the angels and venture capitalists were kind of confused at some point, and was also concerned a bit in the beginning. How do you see this? What do you think about ICOs?
That's another interesting question. How much time do you have left? I think that ICOs, I mean, obviously it started to really emerge last year and become very sort of popular, very sort of in the trend. Everyone was talking about ICOs suddenly. So I mean, it went from almost nothing up to here.
Yeah.
And I mean, there have been some success stories, and there's also been some complete disasters, where basically everyone gets basically tricked out their money, and there's like two or three guys in Russia, wherever, sitting there and laughing. I mean, I wouldn't recommend anyone to invest in an ICO. If someone asks me, okay, so I'm thinking about investing in this ICO, what do you think? I would say no, just because there's too much risk involved, and there's very little chance to actually properly evaluate and legitimize. I mean, is this like a proper startup, or is it just some guys putting up a white paper and a fancy website? I mean, is there actually a business there?
Yeah, 99% of the ICOs that we've come across don't really have any products.
Yeah,
they just have a white paper on a website.
Yeah,
and so at some point you're like, where's the validation? How do you even know you're building something people want to use, right?
Yeah. And I mean, of course, I mean, that's one of the main problems with cryptocurrencies, and not really blockchain, because blockchain is a different animal in some ways. But cryptocurrencies is that, and also of course ICOs. I mean, a lot of people are using it basically for money laundering.
Yeah.
And that is a huge problem. And right now there's so many concerns in so many different areas. I mean, I wouldn't recommend a startup to do an ICO. If someone asked me, a friend of mine asked me, do you think I should invest in an ICO? I would say no, because there's too many unknowns. However, that being said, I like the principle of it, because the principle of it is that anyone should be able to invest in a startup easily, without much transaction costs, without too much friction. I mean, I love the fact that it potentially democratizes the process. I mean, there's no sort of God-given law says that only business angels and VCs should be able to invest in startups. Yeah, accredited investors, exactly, should be able to invest in startups. Of course not. So I'm all for a solution that takes care of that problem. But I don't think ICOs in its current shape is a solution that can deliver on that.
When we come back from this small break, we want to talk about some of the legal aspects, and how you try to how you at TechGrind would try to solve some of these issues for the founders. I cannot, we have to talk about startups. I mean, sorry, Spaces. We're talking about startups. We have to talk about Spaces. Spaces is sponsoring us. And thank you so much, guys, because if it wasn't for you guys, we're not going to be able to do this. Today is, interestingly, the grand launch party here at the Prakannon Spaces. So we have these one day free passes giveaway. And so if you like us, share it us on Facebook, Twitter, wherever it may be. So we'll send you these. We'll post you these. This gives access to any Spaces location for one complete day. And also this beautiful bag. Thanks, Fred. It's nice, right?
It's beautiful. Who wouldn't want that?
And so Spaces, thank you so much, guys. If it wasn't for you guys, independent media like this would not have been possible. Would not be possible. And yeah, that said, legal aspects for startups. So a lot of the founders, when you work on ideas, when work on companies, you don't really think about the legal side of it much, because you're so blinded with the vision you want to create, and you drive towards that, and you don't really care about IP aspects of it, a lot of the legal side. How would you recommend startup founders to go about this?
Mm-hmm. Obviously, when you talk about legal, you're talking about many different things, right?
Yeah.
It's a very broad area. First of all, it's kind of a little bit like you said. Sometimes startup founders don't know, and sometimes not knowing can actually be beneficial.
Why is that?
Because part of being an entrepreneur is to push the boundaries a little bit.
Right.
And if you're pushing the boundaries, then you'll also be able to actually move them. And then you might do something, and then legislation will follow.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of companies have been able to grow. You can say that Uber is an example of that. Airbnb is an example of that. They were able to push regulatory boundaries a little bit.
Absolutely.
And they managed to actually attain a lot of growth by doing that. That was part of their business model. However, when you're talking about things such as IP and that sort of thing, we mentioned that a little bit before when you're outsourcing your software development or whatever. IPs are crucial.
Yeah.
You always need to get that part in order. And also, when you're getting investment, what we're always trying to do then, for instance, if you're doing an angel round, is make sure that we have due diligence that includes legal aspects and IP aspects with all the startups that we're working with, and make sure that everything is in line there. So as an investor, you should be completely reassured that the IP of the company is secure. They have all their source code, all their logos and names and incorporation, that everything is kosher.
So TechGrind has been here for about 3 years now. Sorry, 4 years?
3.5, 4 years.
3.5 to 4 years. Now, like I talked about the program in the previous episode, when I was here in 2012, there weren't really many co-working spaces. There weren't many incubators. There wasn't much activity.
Right.
But now it's everywhere, right? How do you see the Thai startup ecosystem now after 3.5 years being here?
I haven't been here 3.5 years myself. I've been here with TechGrind for a little bit more than a year, so I haven't seen that development myself. But I heard it from many other people also that, let's say 3 years back, then it really wasn't a whole lot. And basically, you've seen this development also. The startup culture, as we know it, let's face it emerged from the States.
Yeah.
And then it's been spreading like a benign virus all over the globe, more or less. I can talk it from the point of view of Sweden. In Sweden, going back, let's say 15 years ago, few people really understood what a startup was, and it was constantly confused with a small business, which is something completely different. But now it's been growing tremendously in the last 15 years in Sweden, and now we have a startup culture that is very much similar to the States. And of course, like I said before, Thailand is an emerging country. It has its own unique set of challenges in many ways. But you definitely feel that there is a mindset now that why are startups needed? Because they're an engine of growth, it's good for society, it creates jobs. And it's beneficial for a nation, because obviously, just in terms of being able to say that myself as a Swede, being able to say that, okay, well, Spotify, Skype, etc., all that is from Sweden. That gives the country some recognition. It gives, it legitimizes a lot of things what you're doing and so forth. So from a country point of view, it's really valuable to have this sort of success case in terms of startups, because they basically raise the image of a country also as well. And I think that Thailand is definitely on the right way in a lot of different things. Some things might go a little bit slow, and some things might be a little bit frustrating, but no one can deny that the trajectory is looking good.
Absolutely. So at TechGrind, what is the portfolio like now? How many companies have you guys incubated so far?
Well, I mean, if you then going back from 2015, then I think there's around 25 companies that have been incubated during that period of time. Of course, not all of them simultaneously, but little by little, so to speak. And like I said, I mean, the portfolio consists of companies basically working in whatever imaginable vertical you can imagine in tech, pretty much. I mean, we have had, like I said, fintech, e-commerce, travel tech, ed tech, and so forth and so forth. And now, of course, we're also tipping our water in a little bit into blockchain and see what that can yield.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I came across an incubator yesterday. They only incubate blockchain startups.
Okay.
Yeah, we were at a conference. Oh, thank you, Knowledge Hub, for the free passes for us, guys. Thank you. Knowledge Hub hosted this blockchain conference yesterday, and yeah, we got free passes for it. Right. It was interesting. I mean, a lot of nice people. Talking about getting back to the topic of entrepreneurship now. I clearly differentiate these two: startup entrepreneurship versus corporate entrepreneurship.
Right.
But a lot of people seem to, a lot of people don't really seem to understand this.
Okay.
How do you say this?
I definitely think that you're correct in differentiating between them. I mean, obviously the context is different. I mean, the startup entrepreneurship, I mean, then you're creating a company from scratch and you want to grow it. Yeah. And you want to grow it potentially into a corporate. Whereas corporate entrepreneurship is about doing something new within an existing structure, finding new growth opportunities, new growth engines. So the context is different, and the resources are different, and perhaps the mindset and the people are a bit different as well.
Can corporate entrepreneurs run startups? Like, for example, right? So if you're opening another McDonald's down the street, you need certain entrepreneurial skills.
Yeah.
But somebody coming from a corporate might actually be able to do that. But can that person run a startup, start a startup?
Like I said, if you want me to say a general answer, I would say yes. But of course, I mean, I need to qualify that and say that, like I said, that again depends on the person. I mean, is that person too comfortable being in a corporate structure? He or she might need that as some sort of like personal safety net or something. And so I mean, like I said, I mean, I would say that generally, yes, it can definitely happen. It can definitely be the case. But again, it comes back to the person, right? It comes back to the person's mindset, the person's drive, and what sort of motivates them.
Another word people seem to be mistaken about all the time is intrapreneurship. How do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it also is that the entrepreneurship and corporate entrepreneurship is very closely related. Yeah. Again, I mean, entrepreneurship, you're doing something within the context of an existing organization, right? And obviously, that could be such as you come up with a new product, or you might have a reinvent business model, and so forth and so forth. But again, in an existing company.
I think a lot of people have. A lot of corporates have kind of realized that. You need to take sort of if you want to stay ahead of the curve, you need to do things faster than these regular corporate structures.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all these corporates are crazy about startups. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious also, because if you look at how a corporate is structured, right? I mean, basically, the corporate structure is aimed towards executing their existing business model and doing that right, and finding efficiency gains into that, and operational excellence and so forth. And of course, then they hire people accordingly, right? Because they hire people who deliver on that, right? So sort of like find a better deal with a supplier to sort of cut costs by 5% or whatever it might be. And they have excellent people at doing that. However, for finding new growth, then they might need different type of people who are have different set of skills, different set of experiences, and that can be difficult to sort of find and integrate within the existing corporate structure.
Right.
So that's why they want to, first of all, acquire startups, and also to work with them maybe in corporate acceleration programs. We see that a lot happening here in Bangkok with the telcos and the banks and so forth. They're doing that a lot. Exactly. So, and that's of course a way for them to sort of tap into new ideas, new innovations, what is actually going on, what is the new thing out there. And mostly, I mean, it's about, for them, it's about to protect themselves from being disrupted, or trying to protect themselves from being disrupted, because that's probably what's going to happen if you just ignore things that are going on outside of their existing business model that they want to incrementally improve.
Right. So when we talk about different startup ecosystems, one of the questions people always ask is, should the entrepreneurs be trying to solve local problems, or should they have a bigger vision, trying to solve world problems? How do you see this? How do you recommend, if you take the Thai entrepreneurs here, would you recommend them to solve problems here in Southeast Asia or Thailand, or would you want them to tackle bigger problems, global problems?
Well, I would say that solve a problem that you can scale with. So I mean, if you look at Southeast Asia as a whole is a big and very growing market.
Right.
So I mean, if you have a problem that can be scaled up to at least the region of Southeast Asia, I mean, then you have a critical mass enough, I would say.
Right.
But however, if you're only looking at Thailand is what, 60 plus million people, and it's very limited. I mean, if you don't perceive yourself to be scaling outside Thailand, you're probably not going to be incubated by TechGrind. Then you should probably go somewhere else. So I mean, we prefer. I mean, of course, I mean, ideally, if you have something that would work on a global scale, you're solving a problem that is relevant globally, excellent, that's great. But if your aim is just Southeast Asia, well, that's not too shabby either.
What do you think about B2B models versus B2C models? Would that matter for an entrepreneur?
Whether you're targeting B2B or B2C, I mean, of course, that doesn't generally matter. I mean, it's all about, I mean, what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? And then you might end up with, okay, this is something that you're better suited for B2B or it's better suited for B2C. But I mean, generally, I mean, both of them can be very profitable, and you can get high growth in any of them. So
doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no. I mean, other things matter a lot more.
What happens after the incubation process at TechGrind? So if it is the 18-month process that they have to go through, once that is done, what happens after that?
Well, then our aim, and hopefully the aim of the startup as well, is that they should be ready for Series A funding.
Right.
And then we're working with them to trying to secure that as fast and quickly as possible.
Right.
And well, then, like I said before, I mean, then usually our aim is to exit after that point.
I think this has been a great discussion. With you here, and anything you want to plug at the end? How can they get in touch with you?
First of all, you have my email address, which is john@techgrind.asia, and of course, I mean, feel free to connect with us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We will post information about what's going on with TechGrind. We're running some interesting events coming up here, so check it out on social media, connect with us, and be in touch.
That's it. We're gonna wrap it up, guys. We've run out of time, and it's been great. And hopefully, it helped a lot of the entrepreneurs that are working on different problems, trying to move things a little forward. To get some advice and hopefully get incubated by you guys.
I hope so too.
And that's it. We're gonna wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for being here. And
thanks for having me.
And thank you, Spaces, the beautiful team, looking beautiful, and my executive producer here at THA. And thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next week.